Is Utah football in danger of losing their place as one of the top 25 programs in college football consistently? We're breaking it all down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. If this is your first time tuning in, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media. We can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, you can get in on the action today by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And speaking of my time as an intern in the athletic department, I was the last time that Utah and BYU played each other. And after that game, I remember listening to this show, and Bryan Brown was there to break it down. Bryan, appreciate you coming on to stop by with me and talk about this game. And I feel like it's fitting that we're going to have this conversation leading into the BYU game because it does feel like this is a pivotal game for these two teams. Now that this rivalry will be renewed moving forward, who's going to be the better team in the state, trying to control in-state recruiting, all of the things that come. And it comes at a time where Utah's season has really gone off the rails. They're 4-4 right now. And to answer the question I posed, yes, they're absolutely in danger of losing their footing as one of the most consistent programs in college football year in and year out with how disastrous of a turn the season's taken.
Yeah, I think that's a big statement right there, especially considering where this program's been and reflecting back to. I think the bigger thing for me almost is just not so much losing the national brand and the national respect and everything like that. It's just I can't remember the last time Utah feeling like this.
Mm-hmm.
And going and watching a Utah football team that just didn't compete the way that we've conditioned to seeing and expecting from Utah football, and that's the part that I think correlates so effectively with that with what you're saying and being a perennial top 25 program is that it feels like the program's lost a little bit of its way.
I mean, it absolutely has. I mean, 4 games in a row they've lost, which is the 10th longest losing streak in the nation, and some losses, just like some wins mean more, some losses mean more. Houston. Losing to Houston hurts. Cougars, maybe a little better this year than we thought going in. It doesn't matter. Losing to Houston with the expectations you had entering the year, we thought this was a nice break for Utah to get right. The stretch of Arizona State, TCU, and Houston. You went 0-3 in those games. You lost 4 in a row going back to the Arizona game. And this is now where the schedule gets hard. Top 10 BYU, soon to be top 10 Iowa State if they keep rolling coming up not long after. Colorado, who's really good this year. Then you look at UCF, right? Like that's still a cross-country road game, even though the Knights have underwhelmed too. So you've lost to middle-tier teams, and then Houston I still don't think is a very good team. Utah's averaging 12.5 points per game on offense, and they're 22 overall, which is second worst in the Big 12 conference. And yes, their defense is performing up to standard in terms of their top 20 ranking, but not like just week in and week out. It's like, oh, Utah will get gashed on the ground. They'll give up the 50-yard runs to Scadaboo. That's something that we didn't see last year, right? The long drives that Houston was able to go on, even if Utah didn't let them into the end zone, that's not Utah's defense. We're used to seeing this team make the defensive play, make the defensive touchdown. All that stuff hasn't been there. And because it hasn't, Utah's lost 4 in a row and is like so far removed from the goals that they had coming into the season, and so far removed from those goals with 4 games to go, Bryan. It's hard to fathom.
It is hard to fathom, and I think to kind of really understand it, you have to understand how we got here a little bit, right? And it does feel like it came a little bit out of nowhere. But as I'm looking back at some of the recruiting classes, it's pretty obvious that this has been coming for a while in some respects. Because as you look at the classes, there have been a lot of misses. A lot of transfers out of the program, and Utah has tried to patch that up with the transfer portal. And I think the transfer portal has been a net negative for Utah, if we're being completely honest.
Okay.
And I think there's there was so much effort and energy after the loss of Ty Jordan and Aaron Lowe to push forward, and it does feel like the program's fatigued a little bit. And then along the way, there's been so much change in the scope of college football. I think, at the coaches luncheon today, and I didn't go to the coaches luncheon, but I was told by somebody that Kyle Whittingham said that, with the introduction of NIL and all the other changes, it's been some of the toughest 5 or 6 years of his coaching career. And you think about absorbing all that in your 60s, and so it's a lot, right? But it feels so sudden because you had such a great uh, hope in rising and the potential that he had to leave this team. And I think it really reinforces his legacy and just truly how amazing he is, and that he should go down in Utah history as one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the history of the program. But I think a lot of it too is just there's so much anger and emotion out there with regards to how the university handled the messaging of his injury and how they've handled the messaging of a lot of things in the last few years. And so I think when you look at it, is Utah in danger of losing that? Yeah, I do think they are. Because in the era of the transfer portal, guys are not going to sit around. When you promise them that they're going to come in and win championships and you don't deliver, guys are not going to stay here. Now, your hope is that guys love the culture, they love the state, all that kind of stuff. But that also goes back to my recruiting a little bit, is that the numbers of in-state kids that they've recruited over the last few years have dwindled. There's more kids in California, Texas, coming into the program every single year. They've dipped into Hawaii, Florida, Arizona, Idaho. It's you look at it, so we can go through the numbers a little bit. 2024, there were 6 Utah players. 2023, there were 5 players from the state of Utah in a class of, I think there were 18 total.
Well, what's crazy too, Brian, real quick, is like some of their highest ranking recruiting classes have come, 21, 22 as of late. And these guys are supposed to have been in this program for a few years now, right? So like that's where Utah should be reaping the benefits, right, of the higher recruiting classes. But maybe this goes back to what we said. It's not just about the ranking on the recruiting class, right? There's a reason that Utah consistently beat USC and Oregon.
Yep. And I think a lot of it is that you've lost a little bit of the touch of development that was so critical in the process. For so long, this program was about the process, respect the process, believe in the process, follow the process. And you just haven't seen that as much in the last few years. It's been so much about conversations about winning championships and everything like that. And now that you have younger guys that are shouldering the burden, and I think it's important to encapsulate, like, Lander Barton, in essence, is a redshirt sophomore, right? But who else is the leader on that defense right now that's playing?
Karene Reed? Van Fillinger?
Yeah, I mean, Van's been in the program a long time. I don't know how much leadership
Junior Tafuna has been in and out of the lineup with injuries this year. Same with Tanu Vasa.
But even so, how many defenses, really elite defenses, have defensive linemen as the main leaders or the main drivers and the main forces behind? It's a tough question because I'm putting you on the spot.
No,
right?
but I
guess Cleveland Browns have Myles Garrett, right?
I was gonna say Ray, like when you just say like best defense of all time, like boom, Ray Lewis popped in my head with Ray. I mean, the Ravens, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed for NFL ones.
This will be way behind your time. Zach Thomas with the Miami Dolphins. I'm like even currently, the San Francisco 49ers, like their best
Fred
leader
Warner.
defensively, Fred Warner, right? Or it's like you said, a safety. Right?
To your point, like JJ Watt lost a lot in Houston, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think JJ's a great leader. TJ Watt's a great leader too, but there's a lot of leadership from the linebacking core of that Steelers team.
Yeah,
so and I don't know, maybe that's a little bit too like we're too on the spot with that debate. But I'm just, I'm looking at the breakdowns, like the 2022 football class, only 4 recruits from the state of Utah, right? And so many from everywhere else. And so I think what happens is guys are not going to want to stick around, right? And you start to lose that. You start to lose booster involvement because NIL is expensive and nobody wants to pay for a crummy team. And then, you've got a coach that's facing retirement rumors, and it gets it gets real scary real fast in terms of how this program can slip.
It does. You were absolutely right. And that's why this team is in danger of falling out of the top 25, because what do you need in order to succeed in today's world of college football? NIL has to be something that is there at a high level, right? To when you look at and when you invest the NIL, right? Like, Utah went in on Cam Rising. It didn't work out in their favor. So when you allocate those resources to a player that's not on the field, you're not going to be as good. And that's where Utah hasn't been as good because they haven't developed the same way. There's issues with the quarterbacks, right? Where Wilson, as a true freshman, is now thrust in there when he really should have been able just to redshirt this year. That's what should have happened, and that hasn't been able to happen. So, yes. What were you saying?
Well, so I just want to clarify one thing with Isaac, because I think even if I think coming out of spring, they knew that he was going to be the backup. He performed best out of all the quarterbacks in the spring. So,
well, they got Sam.
Well, so Sam here thing's strange to me, right? Because apparently the plan has been to redshirt him all along. And now we're seeing rumors on message boards and whatever that he's outperforming everybody. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but if that's the strange part about it. Like, why did you go into the transfer portal, get a transfer portal QB, and then the immediate plan was to redshirt him this year, right? Like that's been the plan from the beginning, in essence.
Especially with how much you had such a chance to be great this year. So why in the world would you hold yourself back from that? If Sam is truly the best guy. So that's why I can't believe that. But it's also just so weird to think like a guy who's had as much experience as Sam, and he had a good year at Cal Poly last year. He wouldn't be better than some of these guys. I don't know.
Well, he hasn't played a lot of football, but neither has Isaac Wilson at this level, right? And so whatever the decision-making was between there and whatever they thought, if you thought that you were going to develop Isaac Wilson into a 5-year, 5th-year starting quarterback, the caliber of Cam Rising, in a couple of months, that is a mistake. And there is no team in the country that does that, okay? There are no true freshman starting quarterbacks that play like 5th-year seniors.
No.
And so if that was the decision-making, if that was a thought process, then that's a major flaw in the thought process. And this is now the 2nd or 3rd year that we've seen this happen, right? Because previously with Nate Johnson, we didn't see the kind of system. And I think Mike Bajakian said this as well. The system is the system. It is built around a Cam Rising style quarterback. And so if that's what you want, then you need to load the roster up with those kinds of guys, and I can get on my high horse about that. You should have taken more local quarterbacks because, the one time that Drew Lisk got into a game, he outperformed everybody's expectations and won, rode off in the sunset, all that stuff. That's not a valid data point, right? But I think the valid data points are the lack of performance and lack of growth we saw from Nate Johnson last year, and the lack of performance and the lack of growth we've seen from Isaac Wilson this year. So whatever the flaw is, y'all need to figure that out because it's really hurting this team. And I think the bigger news is that it's going to hurt the program in a long-term manner if you don't get things turned around.
You're absolutely right. And we think too, like, I know, look, we're obviously frustrated, or people are frustrated with the way that Wilson has looked when he's been thrust out there. But I also feel like people are like passing judgment that this is who some people are, not everyone, are like, this is who Isaac Wilson is as a player. I think back to last year, like, if Caleb Lomu had to play, it doesn't sound like he was ready to play, right? Like Utah had offensive linemen who were better. Like Caleb Lomu got to sit, redshirt, develop, grow, get in Utah's strength program. Obviously, Wilson doesn't need the strength program aspect, but then he blossomed into a really strong tackle. And yeah, you're right. He does need some aspect of the strength thing. That's a good point by you. Even see nonverbals. We still got that connection from when we used to call game together. I could tell exactly where you were leading with that. But Lomu got to sit, develop, and learn, and was a better player because of it. And we've seen this happen all the time. Even Junior Tafuna, before he really broke out in 2021, he redshirted the year before. So still an opportunity to sit back and grow. And that's an important thing. And it feels like Wilson really could have used that. And because Utah hasn't developed their guys as strongly, because, like you said, transfer portal has been very up and down. That is a discussion we're going to have in the future. Like I said, if the transfer portal has been a positive or a negative, because there's been the Cam Risings and there's been other players that haven't always worked out as well for this team too. But any way you slice it, this Utah team has not lived up to expectations. They're 4-4. And with the losses they have recently suffered and with how tough the schedule is the rest of the way, they will not be considered a top 25 team going into next season, barring some miraculous change, in my opinion. And unless they make crazy changes through the transfer portal, this team has taken a step back in large part due to the offensive issues. they are very much so in danger of not even just beyond next year, but year in and year out. They may no longer be considered a top 25 football team because they haven't been able to get over the hump, and their offense has held them back, and the defense hasn't been quite as good either. And I want to continue to talk about the current issues plaguing this team. That's something that me and Brian are going to be diving into in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. This is at FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $100 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And with FanDuel, we got NFL action rolling on today. Tonight, my Vikings take on the Colts on Sunday Night Football. I'm feeling like they'll bounce back against Joe Flacco, which I still can't believe we're talking about Joe Flacco in 2024. But here we are, and credit him for being able to make those plays. We got Utah versus BYU later in the week. We're just coming off a great college football Saturday yesterday. Still got great NBA and NHL action rolling on. How great has it been having the Utah Hockey Club? To get in on all of your favorite teams' actions and lines, you can head over to FanDuel today. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Brian, was there anything else you wanted to add before we move on to the problems this team has when we were talking about this, the sign of the state of the current program and the reason that they are in this 4-4 predicament?
Yeah, I think really when you're looking to divvy up the blame pie, it's got to go across the entire athletic department, yes. Right? Like it's not just the coaching staff. I think it's not just the defense, not just the offense, not just the quarterback, right? I think there's contributing factors to all of this, right? And I think we're seeing a little bit of the, I don't want to say fracture, but just the transition from going from an athletic director that's been somewhere at the University of Utah for 25 years in Chris Hill into one Mark Harlan, who did not have a deep history with the university and how things were run here when he took the job. And so I think, all of this does not fall. And the reason I say this, because it does not fall on one single individual to fix things. It is an entire, department-wide issue in terms of, allocation of resources and everything of that nature. And I've harped on different things over the years of moves that have been made to, or people have left the program that have been replaced. I think the biggest one that always stands out to me is the former sports psychologist Nicole Detling. Mm-hmm. And losing your sports science director Ernie Reimer, those were losses that I think have contributed to things over the years. And while they have eventually allocated resources and things to the team in trying to bring that back, I just think that it takes, you can replace positions, you can't replace people, especially people who really truly love and care about this program and who have devoted their lives to it. And so I think some of that transition transitions are rarely ever smoothly, right? Are rarely ever smooth, I should say. Yes, it was my transition there was not great. And I'm not being critical with my words here as much as I'm just trying to say, like, this is not just like, this has been building up for a while, and we've talked about it over time and mentioned, data points and things here and there, and just, the scheme is not evolved in the way that's more modern and everything like that. And so that comes down to coaching, but also, the edge to the program has dissipated a bit as well. Haven't seen the same level of development in terms of getting guys to superstardom in the NFL. That it's like, when was the last, who's the best Ute in the NFL right now?
Jalen Johnson.
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
So Jalen probably.
Dalton Kincaid's up there.
Yeah. So maybe I have to revert back a little bit on that one. Marcus Williams is another good one, right? Julian Blackman's playing pretty well.
Yeah, they're playing well. They're not. You were talking about stars. I'd say Jalen's a star at the cornerback spot. Dalton is becoming a star. I think
Dalton's become a household name just because he's Josh Allen's guy. Yeah, I don't know that he necessarily ranks super high.
He's just not a top 5 tight end. Like Jalen is a top 5 corner. Maybe Dalton's a top 10 tight end. I don't know for sure. But I get the point you're saying. Like the NFL is not littered with Utah superstar. Do you feel like it used to be that way?
I mean, I do just a little bit, like there's no defensive lineman in the NFL that's really like, that's your standout D lineman, right? Like
Give Jonah Ellis time. He will get there.
Hopefully, I mean,
Hopefully,
that's the thing, but Jonah's a developmental guy anyways. He always was going to be, the Starlo Tuleles are really the ones that I kind of, and Nate Orchard was there for a long time, but Nate kind of like struggled to really find his footing in the NFL. So he's not a superstar. The offensive linemen, I don't know that there's as many in the NFL as there used to be, although Jim Harding had a really good track record for a long time.
I mean, Garrett Bowles has gotten better this year with Denver than he was last year, I'd say. But
and
Braden Daniels, I don't know if he's still there. Satawa isn't doing anything with the Seahawks yet.
So Clark Phillips is another good name. So I mean, there are guys that are obviously excelling, but those are all guys that contributed to Pac-12 championships recently, for the most part, right?
Brian, don't let me forget at the end of the show. I want a fun Clark Phillips story for all the viewers for his Atlanta time. I got a funny story, but not worthy of bringing up right now. But you're right. There has not been that level as of late. Like we mentioned, look, just this is a guy, and Lander Barton is a guy that we thought after this year we were hoping would be a first round draft pick. I thought that's the type of year Lander would have. It hasn't gone to path. Not all of that's on Lander, but there are several times in the last few games where there's been a play that a Devin Lloyd, I would say, would make, and Lander hasn't been able to make that play. That's a high standard to hold him to, and he's still done good things, but he hasn't played up to that standard we maybe thought he would coming in the year, and he's far from the only player on this Utah team that hasn't reached that level.
Yeah, and maybe that's what I'm trying to say with this whole statement, is that it seems like from that 20 to 22 stretch, there were a lot of elite players coming out of this program and a lot of guys that are starting to have an impact in the NFL level. How many do you see that are in the program currently? And it doesn't, I think Spencer Fano is an NFL guy. I think the same thing with Caleb Blomu. I think they're still a few years away, though, obviously, from really showing that.
And they generally can't leave for like another 2 years either.
Yeah. And so maybe it just feels like either the level of talent in the program has tapered off or the development has tapered off. I'm not sure which one.
Well, yep. And we're seeing that take place, right? That's like the biggest thing I've said before. I love the point that you mentioned. There are a lot of things that this team is struggling with right now. I've said consistently, like if you were to say, JT, what's the biggest reason Utah hasn't met their goals this year? I would say quarterback play so far. What is that directly tied to? The development. And there are other areas around the quarterback where Utah could be better.